Peter Schiff, the situation with the war on police. I mean, you and I are libertarians. We've been against a lot of police state stuff. We're against corrupt things the feds are doing, my God. Your dad died as a political prisoner in federal prison this year. Irwin Schiff, a legend for his free speech. I mean, in prison for a book he wrote. So we're certainly not candy coating things. But what is Obama and Hillary endorsing Black Lives Matter, an admitted communist group? All these Twitter lets people go on and say kill cops. If you or I did that, we'd be arrested. What's going on here?
Well, remember, she's got to always play to the Democratic base. She's got to make sure to check all the box of all the various constituencies. You know, they're all special interests, and they're all vying for their own extra, protection, all these various interest groups. And so she's got to continue to play into that. And so she can't condemn anything that might alienate any of these core constituents from these specially protected groups.
And so Obama just has to say, quote, U.S. police must reform. I mean, if people engage in terrorism and then you do what they say, doesn't that just encourage more terrorism?
Well, I mean, obviously terrorism isn't going away. And I think a lot of the things that we do is kind of, the equivalent of waving a flag at a bull. But, it's all for these guys. It's more about politics. It's more about how to use this crisis to our advantage, how to exploit it. It's not so much about the crisis itself and the damage, but how can they utilize this to their own political advantage? And that's what's so, horrible about politics.
By the way, since you say that, here is Al Sharpton admitting the whole police thing is about federalizing him. Here's that clip.
Fighting them all over the country, which is why we're going to do this march from here to Washington. We need the Justice Department to step in and take over policing in this country. In the 20th century, they had to fight states' rights, and to get the right to vote, we're going to have to fight states' rights in terms of closing down police cases. Police must be held accountable. I don't think all police are bad. I don't even think most are bad. But those that are need to be held accountable. So
there he is, federalize the police. What do you make of that?
Well, we already have a federal police force, and I don't want any more of those federal police. I mean, that's a bigger problem. Al Sharpton is always there. He always gets himself in the middle of any controversy and stokes the fire.
Well, federal police killed your dad. I mean, on record, pretty much wouldn't give him medical care and stuff. And so, but you're not going to randomly go out and just shoot some cop, are you?
I like the way he says, well, I guess not all the police are bad. Just most of them. The problem is the police state, not the police. The problem is centralized power in Washington. And obviously the solution is not to centralize even more power in Washington, but to try to break up the power that's already there. And, of course, a lot of the violence, a lot of the crimes have to do with drugs and the war on drugs. And as libertarians, the correct approach there is for the government to basically surrender in this war. It cannot win. In fact, the war is escalating exactly because of what the government is doing.
Right. We're going to fail like Mexico.
We decriminalize these nonviolent crimes and let people choose how they want to live their lives.
We need to pull the ripcord. Europac.com, also Schiff Gold. Schiff, I'm not going to go over all your predictions that have come true. I think you're probably, this is true, I'll only guess to say this, the most accurate long-term, even short-term, on the economy. We're going to break in a few minutes, but what's big on your screen right now? What's the next shoe to drop? What's the state of the economy?
Well, as you just mentioned earlier, gold prices continue to rise. We're about $1,360 an ounce. This is the highest we've been this year. Silver prices now, I talked about silver quite a bit on your show over the years. We're now above $20 an ounce on silver. More importantly, the gold-silver ratio has turned decisively now in silver's favor. And typically when silver prices are advancing on gold, it's indicative of a bull market, which benefits both metals. But, on my own personal radar, what's new in the gold world is my gold company, Schiff Gold, has now agreed to merge with Gold Money in a joint venture between the two companies. And we just announced this today that they're acquiring my company. We're going to be working together.
Congratulations.
Thank you, of our clients and shareholders. And I would encourage all of your listeners to listen to the video blog that we will be posting either later today or Monday on my website at Schiff Gold, or also on my YouTube channel. Josh Crum and I are discussing the synergies and what we're hoping to achieve.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about where you see the economy going, where you see gold going, and more as we look into Peter Schiff's crystal ball straight ahead. I'm Alex Jones. I see in my crystal ball civil war if we don't avert it. Those of us that are on the air have a responsibility to common sense and to tell them the truth. And so for these decades, they denied the world government project, and they denied the Euro tyranny. It was our job to tell the truth and be ridiculed. Like Nigel Farage said last week when he spoke to the EU Parliament, he said, "You used to laugh at me when I came in here and said we were going to expose you. You're not laughing now." And now there are movements in all 30 EU countries to leave. It's estimated most will, and the euro will probably fall. But regardless, we are headed into some very tumultuous times right now. Peter Schiff, Euro-Pacific Capital, one of the most accurate predictors so far I've seen. Long term, I'm not going to go over all of the things he's predicted accurately, but here we are now. We have other news up on Infowars.com. Black Democrat sheriff, Obama-Hillary fueling war on cops to exploit hysteria. Yes, the question is, why? To distract from their agenda. Man arrested for allegedly shooting at police officer in Georgia. So we're seeing all sorts of copycat, bizarre behavior intensifying there. Wow. But getting back to the economy, back to Deutsche Bank, back to the British exit, Peter Schiff looking geopolitically at the economy, looking at what's happening here, looking at the fake growth rates that themselves are bad enough. What is the true state of the world economy right now? And then what else is big that you're looking at?
It is extremely, extremely precarious. You know, the world sits atop a house of cards erected by central banks, the chief architects being the bankers over here, but certainly the central bankers in Europe and Japan, China, they're all part of the game. They're playing the same game, and unfortunately, it's not going to end well for most people. In fact, we were talking a little bit before the break about gold and silver. What's significant about today's rise, in fact, silver prices are up better than 40 cents an ounce as I speak. But the knee-jerk reaction to today's stronger than expected non-farm payroll numbers was to sell gold and sell silver, because in the past, when we got better than expected jobs news, even though the news is, of course, lousy if you look beneath the headlines, but any time the headline number was higher than expected, people would sell gold and silver, because the idea is that, well, this means the Fed rate hike is more likely to come sooner than later. But I think more and more people now realize that it doesn't matter what the jobs numbers are. The Fed ain't hiking rates. In fact, I think the Fed has already started its easing cycle. I think it communicated that to anybody who could read between the lines, and it's not that hard to do.
Sure, what about Europe talking about negative?
Oh, yeah, well, they're going to, look, they have nothing left. I think all they're going to do now is try to change their rhetoric and try to talk about not raising rates. Then they'll talk about cutting rates. Then they'll eventually cut them, and then they'll take them negative. But I think also somewhere along the way, they're going to restart their QE campaign. I think QE4 is going to be bigger than QE 1, 2, and 3 combined, and it's going to be even more destructive to the standard.
I was about to say, won't it be impossible to hide that?
In gold and silver.
Won't it be impossible to hide that level of inflation, and that will translate to gold and silver?
Yeah, I mean, look, most people know there's inflation. They don't believe the government numbers, or they don't even know about the government numbers. All they know is the cost of living is going up. Food is more expensive. Their utility bills are higher. Their rent is going up.
Everything is.
Health insurance premiums are going up. But, Alex, we ain't seen nothing yet. When it comes to inflation, this is just the beginning. The price increases that Americans have been enduring are only going to get much, much worse. They're going to turn up the heat. The government's going to try to claim that all this is good for us, that they saved us from a falling cost of living, and instead we should be happy that everything is more expensive. But nobody is going to welcome a higher cost of living. And your best defense against that, as I said, is to protect yourself, to get out of your dollars, to diversify internationally. I've been telling your listeners all year why they need to get into foreign stocks and out of the dollar. The returns have been absolutely incredible on our foreign stock portfolios. I mean, just enormous. Precious metals, gold-related stocks. I mean, and I think this is just the beginning of a big process, but people can't wait much longer. Given us what you've missed out on if you just haven't been involved the last.
Well, sure. Let's talk about timetables. You like to go out on limbs, but you like to be somewhat specific. Just around your own table, talking to folks at your company, or talking to your brother, or talking to family that will work with you. What's the real prospectus in Peter Schiff's mind? I mean, there's no way this bubble goes on forever. It's already collapsing in many areas. You've got all sorts of countries in turmoil with food riots, and Venezuela is basically almost a cannibalism. You've got all sorts of insanity taking place in the Middle East. Third worlds are collapsing. They're flooding the West. Western governments are opening the door to unskilled, diseased people. I mean, it just seems like a death wish from our leaders. So how bad is it, and what's the timetable?
It's worse than you could imagine. Brexit is just a small example of the problem that, the global financial system can be so impacted by this decision that in a healthy economy with a healthy financial system, it really would be no big deal. But because we don't have a healthy financial system, because we have this bubble, that's why this is a problem. But look, more and more people, mainstream people, I'm hearing people talk who now realize that this is the ninth inning of this thing, this whole experiment with Keynesianism and fiat money. It is very, very late in the game. The time is running out, right? The clock has been ticking and ticking, and it's going to stop. And you could see that. I mean, it's the day of reckoning is getting
sure.
Closer
Ron Paul's big event. Of course, you were his chief advisor, running for president, financial advisor. What is the big event for new listeners? I mean, this thing can go different ways, but again, in Peter Schiff's mind, how's this big event probably get triggered?
No, it's a monetary collapse. When you see what happened to the pound sterling as a result of the Brexit vote, it dropped by 10%. Look, the real drop is not just going to be in the pound, but in all the world's fiat currencies, in particular the U.S. dollar, which is at the center of this whole, Frankenstein's monster when it comes to a monetary system, and it is going to implode. And this dollar crisis is going to make the financial crisis of 2008 look like a Sunday school picnic.
What's going on at Deutsche Bank?
The way it impacts people's standards of living.
Sure. What's going on at Deutsche Bank?
Well, look, I mean, that stock keeps sinking and sinking. The stock is much lower than it was at the depths of the 08 financial crisis with the failure of Lehman Brothers, when people thought, everything would collapse, and this stock is trading substantially below where it was then. So even if you bought Deutsche Bank at the bottom of that decline, if you were dumb enough to hold it until today, you're way down. And the fact is, if these European banks are in so much trouble, the American banks can't be too much far behind. So this crisis is brewing. That's the reason the Fed can't raise rates. That's the reason they're going to cut rates and do QE, because they know how desperately they need to prop up these banks. Of course, we don't need it. We need these banks to fail. But the government needs to preserve this illusion, and so they have to keep the bubble inflating at all costs.
Peter, when you see, not just here but in Europe, leftist presidents and leaders trying to sick mobs of people on the police, it's like something out of the Road Warrior. If the police start not responding, which is already happening in more than 10 major cities, from L.A. to Chicago to Philadelphia to Minneapolis, I mean, just all over, because they're getting shot at, not getting supported, then everything collapses, looting begins. Why would the social engineers be wanting to do that? I mean, are they wanting to hasten a collapse? I thought the Democrats would want to stall a collapse out until a Trump presidency and blame it on him. Or am I reading too much into this? They just have leftist ideology.
I think the Democrats are pretty sure that Hillary's got this in the bag. So I don't think they're planning on a Trump presidency. We'll see if the voters can surprise the pollsters just the way they did in the UK in voting for the Brexit. But, there is going to be, I think, rioting and looting, especially when we have a currency collapse, because I think then you're going to have shortages. I think the government is going to impose price controls, and I think there's going to be a problem for people to get goods and services that are in short supply, and the government creating artificial shortages rather than allowing prices to find a true market level. But, the politicians always come in and try to take advantage of a crisis and use it to expand their power and promise more government help is on the way from the crisis. But I think by then, people might have figured out that it's all this government help that is the problem. It's government that's the crisis, and the real solution is to get rid of government and go back to the free market principles that made America great in the first place.
Let me ask you this. Internal pollsters with Trump, who are very accurate folks, they're not putting out pipe dreams, they say he's dead heat in most areas. In battleground states, he's 4 to 5 points, some areas 7 points ahead. But Hillary just keeps putting out fake polls saying she's winning by 15 points. You're an astute guy. I know there's a lot of election fraud involved. That gives her a lot of points. A lot of folks are embarrassed to say they're for Trump, so that kind of gives him a leg up in some respects. But I got to say, I mean, if Trump really does get rejected, then it shows that America almost deserves what it gets, because he's not perfect. I know you disagree with some of his economic policies, so do I, like the low interest rates. But at a certain point, I mean, if America rejects Trump, they almost deserve what they get.
Yeah, and, if people don't know that Hillary is a crook based on what just happened with this FBI investigation, where basically, they come clean about all the horrible things that she did, all the things, gross negligence, things that no rational person would have assumed you could do. She did all this stuff. and she lied repeatedly under oath to Congress. Yet despite all this, the FBI says, we don't think there's any evidence here because even though she did all this really bad stuff, we don't think she realized it was bad. And the guy started talking about mens rea, which is your state of mind. And he said, we don't punish people who don't realize they're doing something wrong. Yeah, what about my father? My father believed 100% in what he was doing. He did not believe he was breaking any laws. He believed he was following the law and following the Constitution. But in his case, mens rea went out the window and they put him in jail as a political prisoner. Does any rational person believe that Hillary Clinton, a lawyer, a trained lawyer from a high-powered law firm who was 8 years, the First Lady of the United States, was a senator from New York, and then the Secretary of State does not realize that what she did was wrong, that having a private server unsecured in her own basement and using her own personal cell phone
what about the tarmac
to communicate top secret information, from foreign countries, that she doesn't know that that's wrong? If she doesn't know that that's wrong, she is not only incompetent to be president, she shouldn't even be mayor of a small town, but I think she knew exactly what she was doing because she knew she was involved in so much illegal stuff with her and her husband, so many bribes and kickbacks and all kinds of stuff that she wanted to hide her communications from the American public. And in so doing, she jeopardized the national security of the United States.
Sick.
She shouldn't be in the White House. She should be in the big house along with her husband.
Absolutely. And just going back to your dad's case, we should talk more about that, just the evil. I knew your dad well, probably had dinner with him 10 times, had him on my show probably 100 times. Incredibly funny, incredibly smart guy. And I remember in the Las Vegas Review-Journal, it was like the judge said, I will let you out and not give you a sentence, but do not sell this book anymore. It was like the federal mafia. And your dad said, no, it's my First Amendment right. And he spent, what was it, like 13 years or something in federal prison, wouldn't recant, then they wouldn't treat him for cancer.
Alex, they never actually offered to let him out. I don't know where you get that.
I was there was the Las Vegas Review-Journal before they sent him.
Cancer, they wouldn't let him out.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, they never offered. My dad would never admit, but my dad didn't even want to get out of jail, on compassionate release. He wanted to get out on the merits. But despite that, I tried to get him out on compassionate release, and there was no compassion because they wanted him in jail. They wanted to keep him in jail because they didn't want him out because they wanted to make an example
obviously,
of him.
He's your dad.
Say, hey,
you know more about the case.
If you defy the American government.
Sure, obviously, Peter, you know more about the case. I just remember back at the time having folks on about it. It was in the Las Vegas Review-Journal that the judge at an earlier hearing said, look, you keep publishing this thing, we're going to put you in prison forever. And then your dad kept doing it. And then I remember at one of the hearings, it came back up and he said, no, I'm going to keep doing it. And my point is, he was an incredible guy.
Never back down. He stood firm for his rights and for his beliefs, and he paid the ultimate price for that. But once he was in jail this last time, they never offered to let him out.
Sure, exactly. I'm just saying your dad was a hero. I'm just bringing up the fact that they did say, quit publishing it, we'll leave you alone, and he wouldn't do it. He was put in federal prison for his book. That is incredible.
Well, that's part of it. Obviously, that's not the crime that they charge him with. They trump up all these charges of, tax evasion and things like that. But the reason he was in jail is the same reason any political prisoner is in jail in any corrupt regime anywhere in the world. It's, governments want to silence the opposition. They want to make an example of somebody to try to keep the people in line.
You're absolutely right. But getting off your dad's case, very, very sad one, but also very encouraging one, how honorable he was. Look at the IRS persecution, though. And Obama never got in trouble for that. And MSNBC says, oh, yeah, right-wingers and libertarians deserve to be persecuted. Have the Democrats not turned into like a brown shirt group of authoritarians?
They don't get in trouble for anything. We are no longer a nation of laws. We're a nation of men. And if you're the right man, or in this case, a woman, then you're above the law. The law only applies to the little people. And then again, not even if you're doing the right thing, they take the law away from you. They take the protections away from us that are afforded by the Constitution. So we lose our constitutional rights, and the government ignores all the constitutional restrictions that limited their power. Right now, they have unlimited power, and of course, they're corrupted absolutely.
Wow, Peter, I always say this to guests, but I've been asking some of the questions here. Looking at the world, what are some of the triggers for, instead of just a slide into inflation and, a depression they never announced, but that we know we're under, what are some of the triggers? Could it be cities going under, states going under, Puerto Rico and these so-called deals, the Brexit, Deutsche Bank? There's so many triggers out there.
These are all warning signs that there's too much debt. That is the commonality. Puerto Rico is broke, but America is broke. Puerto Rico is just a small microcosm of the overall country that is even broker than Puerto Rico. And we've reached the tipping point. You know that when you have interest rates at zero, when you have all this quantitative easing, this shows you that we've reached the end of the rope, right? We've gone from the sublime to the ridiculous, and how much more ridiculous can we get? I don't think much. There's, I know people say, oh, Peter, years ago, you were sounding the alarm. Yes, I know. I sounded the alarm early. But, at least I knew enough to sound it. At least I knew enough to be alarmed. And the bottom line is, it's the people who protect themselves early that aren't going to be wiped out by this crisis. It's the people who don't know that it's coming. They're the ones that have the most to lose.
Sure.
They don't even know it yet. I mean, remember how much people were surprised by the 2008 financial crisis? Nobody in the mainstream saw that coming, even when we were on the eve of it.
But you predicted it.
This is a much bigger crisis, and they're going to be surprised even more, and they're not going to get bailed out next time.
Well, that was my next question. As domesticated as people are, what do they do when there's finally a really serious collapse or massive correction? I mean, it looks to me like the bubble's much bigger than it was 8 years ago. I mean, this is going to be explosive.
Of course it's much bigger. If they would have let it deflate 8 years ago, we would have had more short-term pain, but it would have been productive pain, and we would have built a viable recovery on a solid foundation. Instead, they blew more air into an even bigger bubble, and now the pain is going to be excruciating. No problems have been solved. They've all been exacerbated. And yes, people need to take action now more than ever before to at least protect their wealth. That's all I can help you with. I can't help you, do anything else, but at least I can help you preserve the value of your savings and your investments, whether it's using gold as an investment, whether it's using it as a form of savings, using the gold money platform, or just investing internationally in countries that are not so screwed up, looking at New Zealand, looking at Switzerland, looking at Singapore, looking at Norway or Hong Kong or other countries where you can go.
All right, Peter Schiff, stay there. I got a few more questions on the other side of this quick break, and then I'm going to go into some overdrive with David Knight and take the phone calls with the folks that are holding and the latest on more police shootings now taking place around the country. I'm Alex Jones, Infowars.com. By the way, we're going to have some live special reports this weekend, not just tape reports, because I think we're going to see more police shootings and things over the weekend. Peter Schiff, in closing, I wish you and others were wrong, but economics don't lie. A day of reckoning is coming. It's already happening in most areas of the world. Outside, the furthest this can push, how long can their hanky-panky and weird manipulations cover up the fact we're in a global depression? How long can this go on, Peter Schiff?
Well, look, the fact that Donald Trump is the Republican nominee shows you that this is running out. The fact that Bernie Sanders got so much support among Democrats shows you how disgusted the rank and file, people are. The fact that the British, despite all the powers that be from all around the world telling them that all hell would break loose if they voted to leave, they did it anyway. Because I guess they figured it was already hell, so let's take a shot. So things that are happening now that you can see is evidence that the wheels are coming off this bus. And, how long it's going to take exactly, I'm not smart enough to know. I'm just smart enough to know that it's happening. And hopefully enough people are smart enough to agree with me, and more importantly, to do something about it. Just don't watch it happen. Do something about it. Because if you don't do something about it now, and then there's a collapse, and all you can do is, I wish I would have, could have, should have. I wish I would have, listened to Peter Schiff or Alex Jones. Don't have those regrets. Take action now.
Well, that's right. I mean,
so at least you won't have to be regretting.
It was all over the news. It was all over the news at the time. How much did your investors make in 2008 when you predicted all that? It was huge.